Hello, YouTube. Welcome to my world. I've decided to call this, What is This and How Do I Eat It? My name is Lethea Jackson, and I'm just learning how to cook anything, like ever. And I'm going to try to cook things that would be delicious, or that I would think would be delicious, or that I've eaten at a restaurant and then wondered how it was made, and things that I've asked other people, hey, how do you cook this? And I'm going to share with you because I think that everybody needs to know more or less how to cook things, but most of us, well, probably more people know how to cook things, and I'm probably more like the exception to the rule, but I think there's probably other people out there who are an exception to the rule. So tonight, my ingredients are steak, mushrooms, zucchini squash and yellow squash, and onions, and green and red bell peppers. And my grandfather used to cook with like 3 different seasonings or 4, but he always cooked with butter. And so I'm cooking with butter and garlic, which I've already got pre-made, and pepper and salt. So basically the theory is that all of these things can be cooked together for stir fry. I've never actually made stir fry before that was with this many ingredients. I've definitely made something like stir fry, but I never took the time to make it with this many ingredients. So here goes. All of these ingredients have been washed and cut as per whatever way that I usually cut things, I guess. I hope that you know what a zucchini squash looks like before you cut it. It's like a tube and it's green, and the yellow squash is the same, and it's been cut into these little moon things. Onion, I'm sure most people would probably know what an onion looks like, but I've made it into these shaped things because this is what they look like at the Chinese food restaurant, and so I would think that that's about the right size. Same thing is true for the bell peppers. So here goes. To the rest of my knowledge, most things should be cooked on medium, so I guess I'm guessing that. And I know that some of these things cook a little faster, which is apparently a thing that you need to know. Some foods cook faster than other foods. So mushrooms are more tender. Beef takes longer to cook than mushrooms. And bell peppers cook at about that same rate as beef. So what you basically want to do is you take what you're going to use as, it's going to keep the skillet wet, whatever you call that, and you put it in the skillet, which is what we're going to do first, on medium. And then you let the butter melt until it makes butter all over the whole skillet, basically, so that it's non-stick. Even if the skillet is non-stick, it's still just a good, I like how it tastes because it's salt, I guess. So you melt the butter, and then you put in the things that are going to take the longest to cook. So as we said, the mushrooms are going to take the least time to cook, and next on the list of least time is the squash, and then the onions, and then the bell pepper, and then the meat. So I'm going to start with the bell pepper and the meat, and I'm going to put in some garlic because I love garlic, and I actually like a lot more garlic than most people. But the garlic is going to cook down, so what you put in the beginning is going to cook down a lot, so you can add garlic multiple times to really bring out the flavor of the actual garlic. I like to cook the garlic with the meat, which is funny because as little as I've made stir fry, I have cooked all of these ingredients individually and eaten them because I would crave just mushrooms or just beef, so it's funny that even though I don't often make it all together, I have cooked all these ingredients, well, most of them, on their own. Usually, bell peppers, whether they're red or green, I often eat them raw. I actually ate a lot of these vegetables raw, mushrooms as well. I dip them in hummus and stuff like that. Obviously, this channel is gonna be touching on foods that are more weird than what I'm cooking tonight, but I just wanted to create something that I felt like was a whole meal first. I'm not sure why, I just felt inspired to. So on a medium heat, meat is going to cook, but it's not going to cook thoroughly unless you turn it. So you have to stir it, and that's why it's important to have butter or oil or whatever you choose to have, because then you have a way for it to not get stuck to the pan and to make it cook evenly. And with meat, meat is red, you know, this, or at least this meat is red, and you know that it's cooked when it turns brown. So what we have here is an uncooked side of this steak and a cooked side of the steak. And you can see by the little line that part of it's cooked and part of it isn't. So you basically let it cook on one side for about as long as it has, you know, like, I don't know, maybe a minute, 30 seconds. And then you stir it. You turn it over so that the red part is back on the skillet. And you just hope to God that it's cooking, you know, at hot enough temperatures that what is gray is actually cooked, you know. Most food, if you're in the United States, or if you're in like a well-developed country, most foods are kept well enough that like if you fuck up and you accidentally make for too much, to not cook something enough, you're probably pretty safe. Like most foods are kept pretty well. But occasionally you can get food poisoning from a food that has not been kept well. And if you cook it thoroughly, then you don't have to worry about that. But if you happen to make it not cook so thoroughly, you haven't completely messed up everything. Like you're bound to be pretty safe. So if your skillet gets dry, you can add more butter. Some people add, you can cook with all kinds of different things to keep it from sticking to the pan, like olive oil or you know, avocado oil. There's lots of really good oils that you can cook at higher temperatures, and then there's lots of oils that get damaged at high temperatures. I only know that from physics class, which is so funny. I learned a lot of this in physics class. But basically, at high temperatures, some oils, some items, some not just oils, but all kinds of things denature, which means that they become too damaged to have nutritional value. And so it just, you know, like whatever your preference is of how to cook something, I mean what to cook it in, you just want to make sure that your food isn't sticking to the skillet, and that's good for the food. It's also good for the skillet, and because over time you don't want your skillet to become damaged. The crummier your skillet, the more likely your food is to stick to it. In this case, I'm blessed. I own a cleaning company, and I house sit for people when they go out of town, and this is actually a client's house, and so most of my clients have really nice kitchens. Like they have really nice stuff. They have good skillets that are non-stick, that are super fancy and stuff like that. But you can really cook on any skillet. You can cook on practically anything. I mean, I've seen people cook on like lids. I've seen people cook on a car engine, so I'm pretty sure that you could probably figure out what to cook it in. So the steak is about done, and but it's not like done, but I don't want to keep cooking it because I'm going to add it to something later that is cooking. So when you're handling raw food, you want to keep everything that's touching it clean, so that you don't accidentally spread infection or, you know, disease, if there is disease on something. And you want to make sure everything's cooked thoroughly. But I usually, from what I understand of how bacteria works, don't let the butter wrapper get stuck on the butter and go into the skin. You don't want to eat butter wrapper. From what I understand about bacteria, if it's raised to a certain temperature, it doesn't really matter what bacteria was there because it's dead in the temperature. So I put more butter in the skillet. This is obviously because I'm adding a different ingredient. I want to make sure that the new ingredient doesn't stick to the skillet. And we've already dumped out, you know, the thing that was good in the meat that made a meat not stick is now been dumped out with the meat. So we're adding more butter to make sure that it stays slippery. The next thing I'm going to cook is the peppers. And I'm going to add a little more garlic again, just because garlic is like the most amazing thing in the world. And now peppers are a little harder to guess when they're done because they don't want to cook them too much or they get soggy, and no one likes soggy peppers. They're gross. But you also want to cook it enough that it's tender. And so the best thing to do is to cook it for a while and then like check it out. Like take a bite of it. Take a bite of just one. They get very hot, so you want to be careful that you're not, you know, overheating it. And the way that I have decided to do that tonight is I actually cut some pieces in here smaller than other pieces so that I could watch those pieces and see, you know, when those pieces are done, and then I'll have a better idea of like the whole, as far as the whole being done. And I didn't put enough butter in there, it looks like, so. And it's kind of hard to tell when it's enough butter, but really, if you just think about it, if you look at it and you see that there's no fluid on the bottom of the pan, then it's probably not enough butter. I don't know if you're worried about like, you know, your heart or something, like the fear of unhealthiness, but I don't worry about that. It's just how I am. Everybody's different. If you are worried about that, you want to use an oil that can be raised to the temperature that it is needed to cook the food, but that doesn't denature. Because if you eat an oil that has been denatured, there are people who, there's studies around carcinogens that say that if you cook some oils to too high of a temperature, it becomes a carcinogen, and there's other people who say carcinogens cause cancer, and you know, it's always so hard to tell how much medical history is out there saying what you should or shouldn't eat, but I cook with butter, avocado oil, olive oil, not canola oil. That's not a good oil from what I understand. I don't use it, that's what I've heard, but everyone's different. So I'm curious though, if you guys have like, I don't know, stuff that you want to know how to eat it, you can go ahead and put it in the comments below. Just like, you know, how do I eat a, you know, rambutan or whatever. Pretty much several years ago, I went to a grocery store and I decided, I just looked at an object and I didn't know what it was. And I was just like, wow, how do you eat that? And honestly, you'd be amazed how many people in a grocery store that work in the food department, that in the produce department, who are really excited to tell you how to cook something, or really excited to tell you how to eat something. And a couple years ago, when I decided to start kind of trying to figure out how to feed myself, I started asking questions to those people, like, hey, how do you cook, you know, what is this and how do I eat it? Like, eggplant, when I found eggplants, I was blown away. I was like, what is this? And then I tasted it and I was like, holy crap, like, this has to be, like, I should have known about this ages ago. But I grew up I grew up in social services, and so like my family didn't, I didn't have a lot of experience with my mom cooking. You know, like she cooked when we were little, but I wasn't paying attention. And by the time we were old enough to be learning how to cook, I didn't live with her. So yeah, I was in the grocery store and I was like, hey, how do you eat this? And they're like, oh, that's an eggplant. You know, you eat it like this. And I was blown away. There's so much food, so much variety of food that we have in our grocery stores, and it just, you know, a lot of that food gets used by people who know how to cook it, and a lot of that food goes bad because people are like, what is that? I don't know how to eat that. I was in the grocery store at, you know, a rambutan is actually like a weird little, it's like a lychee fruit. It's like a little fruit, and you just crack it open and eat it, and it's the seed of the fruit, and it's amazing. I mean, it's tasty. Like, it's tasty. I'll have to show you a video about that. I'm tasting the first bell pepper. And I think it's done. It's like a good body. I'm scraping out all of the garlic because it's gross. Like see, it's all brown. I don't like it when it's like that, so I'm gonna dump it out. I didn't realize that it was gonna do that with the bell peppers, but apparently. Apparently that's a thing with bell peppers, where the garlic gets burnt. Interesting. Noted. So I guess then maybe I won't add garlic to the next things, because I can just add it at the end, which will make it stay not so damaged. Like, you know, that was kind of bad. I don't like wasting food in general, but we're gonna move on to the onion. Onions are interesting, and what I've learned about them in the last few months is that there's two different kinds of onions that are common, and there's also some uncommon onions that can occur in grocery store, in, you know, urban grocery stores, which is where I shop. And what I found is that I prefer white onions, only because they seem to go well with other foods, as far as I've seen. I don't know. I don't really know what goes better with yellow onions or white yet, but I do know that I like onions. I can actually eat them raw, which was a new thing for me. I didn't know you could eat onions raw. Although I remember my grandpa eating onions when we were little raw and thinking he was really weird, but they're actually pretty tasty raw. You can just salt them and eat them just raw. I'm really fond of onions that are fried, and I found that they go with practically any food that I've cooked so far, which isn't many, but it's still pretty amazing that you can put onions in pretty much anything, and they're good for you. And you don't want to cook them too much because then they lose their nutritional value. So you want to be careful to cook them until basically when the white starts to turn a little brown. That's when they're about done. You don't want them to be really limp because then they lose that texture, that pleasant texture, that crunch. But you want them to be, you know, well saturated and well cooked. So you want to cook them until you can't hardly see the white anymore. So they're about done when they look like, well, I guess you can't really see the color very well, which is lame. But you want them slightly browned, but not limp, because no one likes anything that's limp. So, that's the onions. And as per regularity, we're adding more butter. And next we're going to cook green and yellow squash. For these, I am going to add a little garlic just because I'm going to snack on them just slightly. Because squash is actually my favorite of all of the vegetables. Squash is like my favorite. I'm not sure why. It's just always been the tastiest to me. And also in the comments, if you want, you can tell me what is your favorite food, and we can try and figure out like different ways to cook it. I'm totally willing to do the research on to see, you know, hey, how do you cook, I don't know, whatever. Insert weird fruit or vegetable, or normal fruit or vegetable, you know, here. I don't know what's normal, but something delicious. And I'd be happy to try to figure out how to cook it, you know, because I'm curious. I want to know, how do you cook any of these things, because this is a crazy concept. I've spent a lot of time in the last few years eating at restaurants, mostly because I've been very fortunate to be in a place financially where it was a little more convenient to eat out, and it didn't seem like anybody was really against eating out. And so I spent a lot of time eating out. Unfortunately, I kind of got used to it. I got used to not really having as many bills, living with other people, you know, like making deals with them for food instead of paying rent. And now I'm paying rent on my own. I'm paying all my own bills, and turns out it's rather expensive to eat out all the time. And although I still plan to do so, it's a lot. Or I still plan to do so. Still, you know, some eating out and some, you know, eating food from home. I'm in a position now where I really need to be considering how much I'm eating out, you know, because it's expensive. Which I'm sure everyone's been there. Which is precisely why I'm making these videos, because I know that it must be kind of crazy for other people too. You know, it's not just me, I'm sure. So, I'm gonna add some garlic to this. And everybody adds different amounts of garlic. Definitely don't have to add as much as I do. I really, really like garlic. But honestly, I found garlic, pepper, salt, and butter is like, so far, a pretty great way to cook most foods that I found recently. And the way you know that squash is done is it gets kind of, the middles get a little soggy, like you can actually, it's almost like they're getting greasy. Where the center starts to turn clear, but the edges are still, the edges are still, damn it, like not as cooked. I don't know how. Yeah, you can kind of see parts that are clear are more soggy, and the parts that are white are more firm. That's how you know when a squash is done. But squash can cook unevenly, so some of these are done and some of them aren't. And that all depends on how thick you cut the squash. I hate cutting my squash thin, because then it's just soggy and it turns into mush. Like this little guy is cut way too thin. See how thin he is? He's very thin. So they're gonna get soggy a lot sooner than ones that are cooked thick. So you want to try to cut them as uniform as you can, so that they all have more or less the same texture when you're done. And garlic has all kinds of great health properties. It's antibacterial, antifungal, I don't know if it's anti-inflammatory, but it's anti-everything bad and it's pro-everything good. Garlic is like magic. It can be used in all kinds of crazy ways that I'm not going to talk about while we're cooking, but it's wild how many things that it can heal. It's a superfood. It has all kinds of nutrients. It's great for you. It's also very, very tasty. And if you aren't fond of it, you can cook with garlic, pepper, salt, and pepper, salt, and tomato instead, or garlic, pepper, and onion. And those are some good alternatives if you're not into garlic as much. And so, but obviously, if you haven't tried it or if you don't really know how to use it, just try to use it in everything, and I bet you it makes everything better, more than likely. Maybe not, but more than likely. So my squash is getting to be about perfect, and I've cooked everything to just before it's really done, like just at the edge of it being done, because I'm going to put them all back together so that they're uniformly warm in the end, all at the same time. And so that amount of time they'll need to be stirred. I want to have some. Some cooking time still with each item, so that none of the items get soggy at the last minute when they all get dropped into the pan. So another thing that's important is that you don't use metal directly on the skillet, because you can damage the skillet. Unless you don't care about the skillet, but really you should care, because if you damage the skillet, what the skillet is made of can break off into your food. So if you notice, I'm using a knife, but I'm not pushing it through the butter. I'm just touching the tip to the very top of the butter. I'm being very careful to make sure that it layers properly, so that nothing sticks. The last is mushrooms, which are this also amazing thing. Also a superfood, vitamin K, vitamin D, and I know it's vitamin D. There might be vitamin K, but I'm not sure. They're very, very good. Another favorite of mine. Mushrooms are like what God meant us to eat. They're the most amazing thing. These particular ones I think are cremini mushrooms. Mushrooms absorb more oils, and they're porous, so you have to use more stuff to keep it from sticking to the pan or from burning. Burnt mushrooms are no bueno. I just don't taste it that way. Mushrooms are the most tender of all the vegetables I've cooked so far, and so they're the ones that need to cook the least amount of time. And you can cook them on a lower temperature. I don't usually, because I just don't. I cook everything on the same temperature because I get scared that I'm going to mess up the temperature, or that something's going to get soggy because I didn't have it hot enough or low enough or whatever. So I cook everything more or less on the same temperature. In this case, I'm slightly above medium, which is about right. Like I said, mushrooms they get tender way faster. So these mushrooms are already done. Well, not done, but they're just under done. And so now I'm going to start adding back in the other ingredients. Starting with the meat. And now we face the conundrum of having too much stuff in the skillet, which is my favorite conundrum, because then I get to start eating it before I'm done. So I'm going to split the skillet, because it's a small skillet. This is a tactic you can use if your skillet is not really large enough. You split the skillet, and you just take half the ingredients from one side. And try not to drop peppers on the floor. And then you cook just the amount that you're going to eat, right away. Oh, those mushrooms are perfect. basically you're just warming back up everything so that there's a nice even mix of everything in the skillet. And the mushrooms are going to be tender but not overcooked. You want, which they're going to soak up in the juice that the other foods were sitting in. Like all that time I was dumping out that butter, that makes the new juice, so it has more of a layer of juice on the bottom, which is amazing. This is a good time to add garlic, more garlic if you feel inclined, so that the garlic is tender. It's actually, then there's garlic in there that isn't cooked. It's not denatured. It's delicious. And then you would complete this, and for me, being a single person, and I don't have any family or anything like that, I would just put sections of this into containers. So like this I would put into a container, and then cook more and put it into a container, and then cook more and put it into a container, and so on until it's all divided into meal-sized portions. I don't eat bread, so I don't eat like a lot of pastas. I do eat rice sometimes, but this is not one of those times, so this is pretty much done, and it's the amount that would be good for your average, adult who eats well. It's mostly vegetables. It's obviously got butter. It's very delicious, and yeah, that's how you make those foods into stir fry, apparently. So thanks for joining me, and like I said, comment and like and say things. And have a great night. Thanks.